Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, Richard, you're the boss. Shoot.
Like 10 hours for.
This is Saturday, June 6, 2015. Today we're having a conversation with Nicholas Carbone and the Reverend Deacon. And with us here is Jeri Liesagang and Schaedler and Tasha Schaedler as both as our video technicians. Nicholas Carbone is the former deputy mayor of the city of Hartford in the 1970s, and the Reverend Deacon was the former pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church here in Hartford. Both were very progressive activists during this period. We want to welcome both of you, and thank you for taking time to talk with us today. These interviews are going to become part of the CCSU archives at CCSU in New Britain. We want to start with you, Nick, talking about after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, riots happened everywhere in the American cities. Three people, I don't know if I have that right, I believe it was 3 people resigned from the Hartford City Council at that time. And you were, as a young activist in the city neighborhood activist, you were appointed to the city council.
I was the third of the 3.
You were the third of the 3. Okay.
I think the first one appointed was Dr. Alan Martin, who was a Trinity College graduate dentist. The second person was appointed was George Levine. He was a Yale Law School graduate. And I was the third person appointed, and it was over like a 3-month period to the city council, and I think I got on in January. Was the time I was appointed, and that we're dealing with. I think it was the same year that Martin Luther King got assassinated, and that Bobby Kennedy, or it was a year later. I'm not certain of the dates.
Okay. We'd like to ask, what was the state of the city at that time?
Well, the state of the city was always precarious, because I remember the state legislature and the governor, our biggest single expenditure was the public school system, and I think I saw a chart in the early 70s that the state gave the city of Hartford maybe 35% of the cost of education, and then today it's close to being 90%, and we've had to go back to the legislature over, because you never get a touchdown right away in politics, so you're always working progressively and take whatever you can get this year, and then you remobilize and come back the following year. So it's a continuous process, and then part of what we had to do is we had to figure out how to do public education. So I think we were first city council meetings that were ever shown on public television by the CP public television program to try to begin the process of educating the community, which was, we filed a lot of lawsuits. Again, as a tool to educate the community, because then the media would cover the councilman that initiated the lawsuit, and that would get some publicity. So it was constantly, how can we do public education about the changing needs of government? And then the massive change was after President Kennedy got assassinated. Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was born poor in Texas, in poverty, a school teacher, took the dedication to Kennedy and created the War on Poverty. And the War on Poverty then became a sort of federal mandate tied to federal funds, where all of a sudden cities went from collecting garbage, putting out fires, dealing with the whole issue of how do we deal with poor people collectively? And it was a period of educating councilmen, city hall bureaucrats, the general public, the newspaper, the media, trying to get everyone to understand that the war on poverty that Lyndon Baines Johnson did meant we had to do massive changes. And you can't do it all in 1 year. So then how do you figure out a long-term strategy? So that was what we were going through. At the same time, the city is, pardon the expression, the bastard child of the state of Connecticut. And no one wants to own the responsibility for a bastard child. And so we had the state telling us to do something but never giving us the money. Then not giving us the authority. So once we could argue, well, you didn't give us the money, then the second question is, give me the authority to solve the problem. How do we broaden our responsibility with new empowerment, changing the role from the city from garbage collection, rat control, into a real public health initiative. And the definition of public health is changing. But at the same time, we were closing public health hospitals. So there was always, it was a period of rapid change, both at the federal level with the war on poverty, Lyndon Johnson, after the assassination of Kennedy, the political assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Robert Kennedy. So all of these became focal points as a changing society, and society just changes so rapidly. It's not static. So how do you, what is today is different tomorrow. So it's that rolling, it's like a big snowball coming down the hill, and it's getting bigger and bigger as it comes down the hill. And that's the rapid change that takes place in society. And we got to change views. We got to change who we are and how we approach things. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Very good, thank you. And at that time, Hartford was considered, along with Berkeley, Madison, Wisconsin, and Cleveland, to be one of the most progressive cities, which I thought was quite an honor.
We probably had one of the brighter city council in the United States. Again, Alan Martin was a Trinity graduate, then he went to dental school. George Levine was a graduate of the Yale Law School. Mary Heslin her husband was a lawyer. She was a school teacher. You know, so when you look at the quality of the council, we had almost everybody except me had a bachelor's degree. Everybody was a college graduate. So it was, and we were collectively taking, how do we make the city work? How do we manage and reallocate shrinking resources? We would do scenario planning. What is the city going to look like in 5 years? What are the problems going to be? Because you can't plan just for today. You've got to do like a scenario planning, 5, 10 years ahead of time to see the changes.
Jay, we want to ask you, you were the first pastor at Metropolitan Community Church beginning in 1974. What was the state, I guess we should call it the gay community at that time, I'm a little mixed on that, the gay and lesbian community probably, we really hadn't grown up. What was the state of the gay and lesbian community at that time? And, you know, just give us a little rundown of that. I know in Bob Marchie's recollections, he said that you were very much involved with numerous rallies and vigils. He pointed to a candlelight vigil in front of Hartford City Hall to bring awareness about discrimination towards gay people in housing. How else did the church respond? And, I know a lot of the early members came out of the Kalos Society, which was, the early activist group here. So how did your church and how did your members respond to some of these issues that were happening in the city? I know the city council was bringing forth all sorts of initiatives, guaranteeing the city residents and minority hiring and all sorts of things that we think about today as being multi-issue. So I'd like to know, what was going on? What was going on in the gay community? I hadn't even arrived here yet in '74. I don't even remember where in the world I was. But what was happening in that period?
Well, there was already the Kalos Society that you mentioned. And Ken Bland, who was one of the leaders of Kalos, let me stay in their apartment, Ken and his partner. So I came down here, the end of '73, beginning of '74. I'm not sure about the exact date. And religiously, there was no place to go for people. So we started having just some discussions in people's apartments. And Dignity didn't come along until '75, so there wasn't even that. And the religious landscape was pretty negative. You had Emmanuel Congregational Church was kind of friendly out on Farmington Avenue, right?
Or Capitol Avenue.
And there was Hannah Jones at the Episcopal Cathedral downtown. Very few friendly voices. So we started having gatherings in apartments and then had our first service in Morris Pike's house. He was a minister of religion education at Emmanuel. So we had a couple of services in his house until we arranged to rent the Unitarian Meeting House on Bloomfield Avenue. And little did I know then that I would wind up a Unitarian minister with very much more liberal views than MCC had. But all kinds of things started to happen very, very fast. For instance, there was this Mandala organization that was trying to organize a Holocaust memorial, refusing to have any gay representation and making all kinds of remarkable anti-gay statements. And things started to heat up. There was the Dade County Council passed a basic civil rights ordinance in January of '77. Employment, housing, public accommodations, and Anita Bryant began her campaign. And let's see. Yeah, so there was a referendum organized by Anita Bryant and her Save the Children organization. And so this was put to a public vote, and we lost. 70% voted against civil rights for gay people. And the next day, my car was, and Donald Zajac, who was at the time head of the Connecticut Gay Task Force, rented a room in our house on Collins Street, and he saw this thing go into flames. It was parked in the garage in back, and he rushed out to put the fire out, rescued the garage and the car. But and we had a guy who was attending the church who called himself an archbishop. His name was E.C. Payne, a really weird man, and he would get to know people and call them employees and say the employee is a homosexual. So we got a court order to keep him out of the building. And I think he's the guy who set fire to my car. It was very, very crazy person. And I remember I wrote to all the city councils in Hartford after the Dade County vote, and after it got put on the ballot, 4 of them, and the council passed unanimously a resolution calling for civil rights for gay and lesbian people. But that was May 6, 1976. I dug it out of an old file last night.
What was the year,
Pretty
Jay?
impressive.
May
Jay.
76, I think.
76, Jay?
Pardon?
The date, what was the precise date again?
May 16, 1977.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that
Yeah.
follows, 77.
And then on the 25th, the Hartford Current ran a column by me that was the whole upper half of the op-ed page. And then, oh yeah, in 1977, Channel 18, WHCT, the Jesus station, ran Anita Bryant's PTL Club, an hour-long anti-gay rant that they ran 8 times. So I filed a complaint with the Federal Communications Commission in February '77, and that wasn't going anywhere because you needed to then have a transcript to prove that you had been maligned. But the owner of this network of Jesus stations, this Gene Scott character, called and arranged to have me do a response. So there I am in the HTC studio with my response, sitting in this big empty studio with one camera, and I put my watch on the chair of the arm of the chair, and I'm about to get my hour. And just as I'm beginning, the watch falls off the arm of the chair, and I carry on making this plea for people to understand that despite their particular religious point of view, that gay and lesbian people are human beings with rights and all this sort of thing. And finally, I concluded, and the end of the debate was 59 minutes. So I thought, that is like a little miracle. I should have said, "Hallelujah, Jesus, this is a miracle." I had no clock. But that was aired, and then there was the urban environment there. And Ken Sack, who was a UCC minister, he's now in Washington, he was running the Hill Center, the community center. And this time, the urban environment fair was hosted by St. Joseph Cathedral. And I know that Ken had talked with Father Perino about this, and he understood that we were going to be there. But when the morning came, we're setting up our booth, and we are told that if we set up our booth, the cathedral will shut down the whole urban environment fair. So I ran over to Arthur's drugstore, to the payphone, and called Channel 3 and the Current. And then George Wells, who was the executive of the Capital Region Conference of Churches, and a real hero during this whole era, he led the whole urban environment there across the street to the Etna grounds. So it was one thing after another. And then on May 18th, I remember, 1978, what was her name, Pressa Marita?
Yes.
It put an ad in the Current, and her ad on May 18th said, "Homosexual bands using drugs will roam your streets, killing and hurting the young."
Jay, let me stop you right there. That one there, I just read that one about us roaming the streets to kill their children. I want to go back a little bit though too, and I want your ideas on this also because it really resounds to what's going on today. In the research, we came upon this, I'm going to read it. City Community Energy Corp hired unemployed Hartford residents to remodel public buildings and homes of low-income families. The Maverick Corporation helped ease ex-convicts and teenagers on welfare into job force, helped put workers back to work and abandoned houses back on the tax roll. And they also provided paid jobs and academic instructions to youth. You know, it sounds like during this period, with Nick as the deputy mayor and what was going on in our community, these are things that we should really be doing today. You know, our governor's now talking about second chance programs, you know, for ex-convicts and all of that. I just, you know, just briefly, both of you, talk about that. Talk about, you know, what really we should be doing, you know, for ex-cons, people coming out of prison. I don't even like that term. Let's just say people coming out of prison.
Ex-offenders.
Yeah, ex-offenders. You know, and what our corporations and our government should be doing now. You want to start, Nick, since you were, you know.
Well, I think we put on the books a city ordinance, because the Maverick Corporation, I think, was being funded out of New York City by the Ford Foundation, and there was a former aide to the mayor of New York City that was down there running the project. So we were getting grants for the Maverick Corporation in Hartford, and Dan McKinnon was the executive director of that nonprofit, and we were taking ex-offenders coming out of jails, and I think we had two companies that we were profitable, or activities that were semi-profitable. One was recapping tires, and the second one was redoing furniture. So we had, I think, a building on Windsor Street that we subdivided, and one we were doing the tires, recapping, scraping, threads, and the other we were doing remodeling of furniture, wood, craft, in conjunction with grants from the Ford Foundation to take ex-offenders, get them into workable skills. And then I think we passed an ordinance, or part of the ordinance, I think, a non-discrimination. And I think we had gays and ex-offenders in that ordinance, which helped me get the votes on the council later on to pass the ordinance on non-discrimination. So it was in housing, employment. I think there were 3 categories we were targeting to make sure it was non-discrimination. Reverend, I don't know,
Jay? Jay, are you still with us?
Oh, I'm still here. Yeah.
Oh, good.
I'm not hearing anything there well. All right.
What we were talking about is the different corporation groups here in Hartford back then that were hiring ex-offenders and teenagers on welfare and putting them back into the workforce. And we were saying that it's something that we really need now. Our present governor, Governor Malloy, is talking about a second chance bill. We also worked on an out-of-the-box bill where you don't have to, you know, put on your employment application that you were an ex-offender. So I just wanted to know, as a reverend, on, you know, as a gay man also, what is your views on that? What you know, what can we continue to do, or what can we do?
Well, I mean, for one thing, you've got that box on job application forms that still ask way too early when placing ex-offenders because of the disproportionate application of drug laws to people of color, vast numbers of people who shouldn't be imprisoned in the first place, and now their lives are, permanently as screwed over by their having been offenders. So we have an awful lot to do.
Yeah, but see, I think it takes more than a box. I think you have to have part of the employment structure and the training at corporations, a person who is sensitive to the fact that part of your job with a new recruit is to teach them all the methods to make employment more productive and efficient.
Yes.
But that requires an ongoing training program and sensitivity to an ex-offender. And you don't know what happened the night before, what comes back in, because a lot of ex-offenders are living in extreme poverty. And if you're living in extreme poverty, then you've got a problem with the bill, debt collectors, telephones. So there's no pure environment where that person goes after 8 hours of work into an environment that's still supportive of it. So if you don't think comprehensively, and so I think with the Maverick Corporation, one of the things we were doing, we had intensive monitoring for the first 3 or 4 weeks when a person came out of prison. And I think it was maybe one trainer for like every 10 person. And so it was very intensive because that is when they're more likely to slip up. So you had to spend invest more time with the person to change the behavior pattern. It doesn't change overnight. There's going to be minor indiscretions. You have to counsel on the indiscretions, to correct it. Then as like the second period of 10 weeks, the supervision on the ex-offender was less intense because they began to conform to what most employers want. Show up on time, put the time clock in, don't get in a fight on the job, don't swear at your colleague. So the whole training in behavior pattern is you don't want a fist fight on the job because 2 guys are swearing at each other. So it's a cultural change that could take place, but you have to be aware of it and you have to be sensitive to it, and then you have to figure out how to try to correct it. And I don't know, I think Jay would, what's your response to that, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very big project, but if we're serious about it, we've got to do all this.
It's not snapping fingers.
No.
It's a real commitment to behavior change.
And of course, we have the right-wing Republicans in the way all the time for any real progressive terms. Some of them.
Well, then you've got a punitive approach to correct them.
Well, and it's even going to get worse because the thing that I saw the last week in the Wall Street Journal, we're going to create big factories and we're going to put robots in it, and we're going to replace manual labor or human labor with robots, good and bad. The good is it might give us an opportunity to renegotiate the work week from 40 hours a week to 35 hours a week. It might give us an opportunity to take the increased productivity and pay for health care. So if you can increase productivity, that increased productivity from changing the tools of industry, how do you divide that increased productivity fairly among all the people who are part of the process, rather than sending all the money to 6 billionaires who are running hedge funds and getting $1 billion a year salary? So the real thought process is, as we increase productivity, as we make the society more efficient, how do we share that increased productivity fairly and not push it all to the $1 billion hedge fund manager? So the process of rapid change is you got to think holistically. You got to think of all of the tools in your thing, and then say, what's the equity of how do I distribute that increased productivity? Because I remember when we were an agricultural economy, farmers worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. That was the work week when we were farmers, planting, etc. And then as we became more to the modern assembly line, we reduced the work week to 60 hours a week, at 10 hours a day. Then it went to 45 hours. And I remember when El Agrasso got in, the big debate was the work week for state employees going to be 5 days a week at 40 hours, or was it going to be 35, which was the work week that Dempsey put in when he was governor. And Ellen went back on that, and there was a big explosion. And out of that came the collective bargaining laws.
But with that, when we're talking about 35 hours a week, I've always thought, and I've always said to people joking around, well, vote for me. You could work 4 days a week, but could get paid for 5. I think that's one thing we have to be very careful of too. If we drop the week hours down to 35 hours a week, we got to make sure that the insurance is there. We have to make sure that people are still, making enough, which
Well,
they're not in a lot of things.
see, that goes back to the definition in the caring society where we're protecting all human life and we don't want to destroy it. What are the essential things we need in the modern economy? Well, we now all agree that we need, with Obamacare, but it started with Hillary and Louise, and when Hillary Clinton was Bill Clinton had got elected, they were trying to do health care for all, and we lost that battle, and the advertising was on television, ads against Hillary Clinton. Obama came back in, and what they did is the lessons learned from the fight when Bill and Hillary Clinton lost health care for all. There was an agreement with the insurance industry. There was an agreement with the doctors. We guaranteed a fair wage increase to doctors, that we weren't going to make them pay all the pain. But we were taking the cost curve or the fee curve and gradually tapping it down as they got more and more productivity. So again, you got to go back to looking at all the pieces and dealing with it holistically. It's not simple. That's what I would underscore.
I want to read something to both of you guys. You don't really need to answer it, but when I was, let's see, in '99, we did an exhibition that traveled around the state challenging and changing America. And one of the interesting things about the state of Connecticut in 1970 is this here. The Motor Vehicle Commissioner refuses to reinstate a resident's driver's license on the grounds that he is an admitted homosexual and that his homosexuality makes him an improper person to hold and operate his license. According to the attorney involved with the case, the suspension of the license was not at any time the result of a matter pertaining to the use of a motor vehicle or the use of a public highway. I just thought that was a little bit interesting to throw in there, that where some people were at during that period, and how the 70s decade started out for this gentleman here. And we do know in the 70s that there were many attempts to pass civil rights ordinances, beginning in the early 70s by the Kalos Society, and coming all the way up through to 1978, when I guess it was 77, 78, when 2 civil rights ordinances were introduced, from what I can find here. One was the ordinance here: neither the city of Hartford nor any persons, firms, or corporations with which the city contracts for the purchase or sales of services or products of any kind shall discriminate against any person because of sexual orientation. And the other one I found was from April 10th in the council minutes. I've got to go back and research this some more. It shall be unlawful for any person, firm, or corporation to subject or cause to be subjected any person to the deprivation of rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the state of Connecticut on the account of sexual orientation. Now, I'm a little confused. I know the first one, the city of Hartford. Is that the one, Nick, that you got the votes, finally got the votes? Tell us a little bit about getting the votes. And then Jay, you can come chime in on this one too, because I know you were at these hearings, and I have a wonderful statement to read that you had made at that time.
There were,
That's back to that period, Nick, of,
there were a couple issues that are coming together. First, the general affirmative action after the Kennedy assassination, et cetera, is we sort of did an inventory of the city's purchasing power and all the money that came into City Hall. Where did it go out? You know, so you went education, the various functions, police department, et cetera. Then the second part of that was, did those agencies, police department, fire department, board of education, hire vendors? Did vendors provide service? The city of Hartford had entered into contracts with Blue Cross and to provide insurance. I remember the city of Hartford, the doctors coming to me, and we did the paying doctors, a separate ordinance. The third thing we did is when I was talking to the insurance company, is how do I get the insurance companies, which some city dollars went into like Travelers, because we were buying insurance through Travelers, we were buying healthcare, vending through Travelers. How do we leverage that money? So we started introducing this group of ordinances. And I would go to John Filer and say, well, Travelers does all of our casualty insurance. They're giving me a hard time about X, Y, and Z. Could I count on you, your company, to do it, because that's a sole casualty? And he said, no. You go back to Travelers and tell them, I'm going to study it, but I think I'll have an affirmative action like in 6 months. So I go back to Travelers and say, here's the issue, you've said no, your staff. And I went to an upper. Edmund's studying it in a positive way, and I think you're going to have a deal for him. Could you correct your behavior down below? So you had to sort of figure out how to get to the bosses, which they really didn't want to see politicians, get a message to them so that they could institute the request down to the purchasing department of Travelers. So if you go back, you'll see that we had Travelers delegating staff that worked from Travelers to come back and run the city as a nonprofit. And so we were reaching into the corporations to loan us of executive. Part of what that did is allowed us to educate them of our problems to go back inside the Travelers or inside the Aetna to get the change. And I found out you can sometimes make better change if you go to the person who has the power first before you go to the press. So one of the strategies is never go public to the press. If you, and we were trying to find out, you'll hear a phrase, I was working with the bishops. Well, the bishops were the major corporate leaders, and we would work I think we'd meet once a quarter, hour and a half. They would have 3 items on the agenda. We would have 3 items on the agenda. We would rotate them. I was able to take 1 or 2 councilmen if they were the lead person on that issue, so I could infuse the council, so it wasn't me just going to meeting with the business leaders on the council person that was in the lead. And we used to meet in the Hartford Club. So it was, before you go to war, before the press releases, before it's in the newspaper, how do you begin the collaborative process to see if you can solve a problem? And rather than have everybody put their fist up, ready to fight. So the last thing you want to do is get into a public fight with a major corporation, because then they don't want to lose the pest, the media people get involved, they can't lose the struggle. So the best option that I found to become effective was get to the leadership before the fight became public. And the last thing you wanted to do is have a public fight when you could first have a private negotiation. That's just a style in problem solving and collaborative process of problem solving to get everyone at the table where they're willing to have an honest, fair dialogue.
Did they finally came on board then? with
Yeah,
the
well, we
ordinance
changed
after
the ordinances,
discrimination?
travelers began to have some affirmative action on their vendors, because travelers all over the United States has a lot of vendors.
Yeah.
They're buying a lot of stuff. So if I want to leverage my dollar, if I can get travelers to change their corporate behavior, if I could get Aetna to change their corporate behavior without embarrassing them, it has a greater impact on making change. So even today, if you look at some of the fights, it's the major corporations coming in on some of these states where they want to change. They were trying to reverse gay rights, and said, but the major corporations are leading the battle. So how do you get the major corporations who have a lot of economic power to lead the battle? That takes corporate boards of directors, diversity, to get the thought process, to get the corporate behavior, so it's positive towards the society we're striving to get to in 5 years or 10 years. So it doesn't happen overnight. It's a planning structure, and you really have to sort of say, how do I make the corporations my allies on the social change we need for the greater good of the society? I don't want war anymore. So how do you get everybody, instead of flying planes, so like Obama is having sanctions against Russia, trying to change the Russian behavior, and then you got the Chinese doing something else. So the whole notion of how do you get into a collaborative, how do you find a mediator to bring both parties together? Do you use Bishop Francis for an issue like on Cuba, where he called some people from the White House up to Canada, the church did? And we've changed overnight the whole way we did with Castro. So you've got to sort of like look behind and say, how do I make change? How long it's going to take? Who are my allies? How do I get them aboard? Rather than just taking a sledgehammer, because then everybody's going to react if you put their fight up. I remember my sons wanted to take boxing lesson, and there was this gym teacher from Hartford school system, Billy Taylor. The first year, he wouldn't let you throw a punch. He would teach you how to block punches, cover up. He wasn't teaching you how to knock someone out. Defense, how to protect yourself. So sometimes you got to just change the notion. How do we create a collaborative process to solve the problems that we're going to be facing in 5 or 10 years? You can't do it then. You've got to sort of put the process in place and start the collaboration as early as you can.
But I did notice when I was reviewing council records from that year that the ordinance was tabled many, many times. And then finally with the meeting. And I did read, of course, about the Blue Berets showing up there. I also saw that there was quite a number of people in the city, the records that were opposing this ordinance. They didn't say the names in the council records, but a lot of petitions were sent in to you guys opposing it. And Jay, I know when you were at this hearing, where's this wonderful statement that you made? If I can find it here. I guess it was when the Blue Berets were there at the hearing. And this is an interesting statement because we can say, well, in many parts of America today, this statement could still be said, and it's the truth. The greatest evidence for the need for this ordinance is right here now. It is the mindless hatred, fear, ignorance, and prejudice that continues to terrorize the lives of gay persons in our society and even in our city. Just tell us a little bit about, when you were there at those hearings.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I have somebody coming at 12:30, so I'll talk relatively fast here. And Nick, you were so effective during those years. Those were really good years for Hartford. And I remember the ordinance went through some cycles. I mean, there was the question of, does the city have the authority even to do this? And then Barry Zitzer did a little study and said, yes, it does, can do that. And then you have the vote. Well, in May, it's not going on in May, and I remember I was doing digital recall, and the ordinance
Got vetoed by the mayor.
The class was two votes, right?
Yeah.
But then George Atkinson, the next day, comes back from Greece and vetoes it, which is a bit of a surprise because he seemed to be generally in favor. On the other hand, there was this rivalry. I think the really effective guy in city government was Nick Carbone, not George Atkinson. And I don't know, maybe this is his way of getting even. But he vetoed it, and then I guess it's a really stronger ordinance finally passed, wasn't it? And we're at this hearing, and you also had John Dempsey, who was a Catholic priest, and son of a former governor?
Yeah.
He was there to testify in favor of the ordinance, which was quite amazing to the many people with blue berets on. And but they had all come on their buses from East Hartford, and they had made their astonishing statements. And I've been wondering what to say, but after today, what Beck had to say, it was very easy to say, this is the greatest evidence for the need of this ordinance. And she had just run her ad in the Hartford Ct that I read from a little while ago. So this is all more evidence for why this thing needed to pass. And I think I left Hartford in July or August, and the ordinance finally passed just after that, I believe.
What we had to do is we replaced one person on the council, I can't remember, and then I had a member of the council whose child didn't know whether dealing with sexual identity, and they asked me to give them a couple months while the child was going to counseling. So I had to dribble until the child finished the counseling, and then I had a commitment for the vote, but he wanted his child to make the determination for themselves before the father went on record and voted in favor of the ordinance. So that was just some of the human politics that takes place when you're trying to move new change, because I think we're probably one of the first municipal ordinances that ever prohibition against discrimination in housing, employment, et cetera, based on sexual identity, race, and ex-offenders. I think I had to cobble together a little bit more to pick up, to let someone hang their hat on. I said, what do you need to vote for the ordinance, was my question. What changes would you want? And always push the burden back to the person that's undecided to say, well, okay, if I get that for you, because I got to go convince 4 or 5 other people, because this is not my ordinance, but I'll do it if that makes, it allows you to be able to vote. So it's that negotiation, cobbling together a collaborative, giving everybody a chance to give their input in a different way. And that's what and I think we had 7 votes for it, because we needed to protect
7-1.
Yeah, 7-1.
Well,
Because
Liesagang, I believe, didn't vote.
yeah, because if Assington vetoed it, I had to have the 7 votes. So now I went from 5 to 2 more, and it was just it took a couple months.
I want to ask you, Nick,
And you had probably personalities like lesbian. Wanted it to apply only to discrete persons. Discretion, and he was opposing it. And you had Olga Thompson, who I think was probably influenced
By the churches.
The Catholic,
No,
the diocese.
yeah, she was,
But institution and Gardner.
yes, and Gardner was a positive.
Well,
Mildred Torres was
yeah, I was gonna say
positive,
Mildred.
so was with Sid. I think Mildred Torres we appointed
You did have
after Barbara became Secretary of State, and that gave me another vote publicly, because I had Barbara privately, but I had to wait until after the Secretary of State's office.
yeah.
But now that she won, and Mildred came in, and Mildred was committed to it, I didn't have to make Barbara, who I was hoping someday could be a congressperson, make them walk the plank on a controversial issue gratuitously. So with Mildred Torres taking Barbara's place, when she won the election, it got me up to the 7 where I didn't care if Athens and vetoed again. And that's how we did it, right, Rev?
That's right.
I just want to ask,
Very tricky, very difficult, and many, many
Meetings.
stages of negotiation.
just one last question
Well,
to me.
I so appreciate the opportunity to, oh, yeah.
No, I just want to say one last thing to ask Nick of one thing. And don't take offense how I say this. I don't know how else to put it. Coming from a very prominent Catholic family in the South End,
Yes.
did you ever be threatened or felt threatened, or, what went on there?
Well, I was brought
you
up,
care to answer.
I was brought up a Catholic, but I had a whole series of issues with the Catholic Church. Not that, and so with it, like going to confession. So these were ongoing arguments I had with my mother, who I loved dearly, who was always trying to make certain that I wasn't doing things crazy. So my mother educated me a lot because she was brilliant in her dialogue, and the family discussions on a Sunday morning were powerful. And she educated me, but it was always coming back. So last thing I'll ever say for the record, they took me to the church 5 or 6 times to make my first confession. And I would walk in one door and out the other. And that's the end. I finally went there.
So this is a good time, we're running to the end of the tape.
Yeah.
We can switch
Okay.
to another tape, but I know Jay's got to go.
Jay,
Reverend, thank you. It's good
Yeah.
to see you again.
Oh, so good to see you, Nick. Yeah, with a treat.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Can we continue this discussion, with other things about the Metropolitan Community Church and whatever else we can come up with?
He's gone.
Please not.
So we'll disconnect him so we're not peeking on him. And then we can continue, up to you, whatever you
Okay,
we have to switch
Maybe
tapes.
another 15 minutes.
Whatever, this is excellent,
Yeah,
so.
and I think you got what you need around the ordinance.
This is,
And what do we?
It's 12:30.
Okay, so I still got,
Yeah, I mean,
You let us know.
yeah.
Actually, you're better off going late to the shower, because if you're gonna crash, you wanna make an entrance.
Yeah. This is sexism, they got a shower,
yeah.
and,
Those are the two things. So a lot of people have the ethics, or they do the same thing, but they don't have the craft to put the pieces together and to, have a 5 or 4 year or 2 year, passing the ordinance is probably a 2 or 3 year strategy.
it takes a while when you get in City Hall just to learn the system. When a person goes on to council, they don't know.
Right.
They don't know the difference between an ordinance and a resolution. They don't know all the various pockets. Where does all the state grant come from? Where does the federal grant come from? How much in the municipal budget comes from outside sources? then what can you do to those outside sources as you ask for more money to shape the change that you can then leverage somewhere else? So
Do you remember this guy? Big Boy Corelli or something?
Yeah.
Big boy.
You do?
Yeah,
Nothing up the orphans.
he lived up the street from me. He was a
Okay.
Budweiser salesman.
'Cause that
He was a
was-
prize fighter who knocked down in the Spire
He was on
and
Human Relations Commission too.
Yeah, but he knocked down Joe Lewis.
Oh.
I mean, that's how big he was. He
Oh,
was a
really?
beer
Yeah.
salesman.
And he was the one that started up, where is it in the notes? The Schaedler Liberation Front were going to have a picnic at Goodman Park in 1971.
Oh, he lived right up next to Goodie Park.
Yeah,
He was
and,
2 houses away from
He
me.
got 400 South End residents
Right.
to sign a petition against it, stating that homosexuality goes against God and stating they feared for their children. Then
Richard, he got punched too many times in the head by Joe Lewis. And he was a good-hearted guy. He was a beer salesman. Afterwards, Budweiser.
yeah.
And you see him, big, tall guy, what, 6'4"?
Is he still around?
No.
No, he died,
He
but good-hearted guy, you follow
Yeah.
me? So someone,
Well, he showed up at the picnic and was cooking the hamburgers.
yeah, no.
Yeah, which is strange, you know, what happened.
Oh, he was a
Yeah.
good-hearted, but
But he,
Yeah.
you know.
but he was, he got punched by Joe Lewis several times.
Mhm.
That's what I used to say. I mean, what do you want for an next prize fire?
But he was always, you know, in primaries and stuff, the other slates. He worked for the other, he worked against your candidates a lot of the time.
Oh, we did, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a,
Was he a Republican?
no, he was a Democrat, but I had a lot of fights in the South End because they felt I was too much for the Puerto Ricans
Well,
and
that's what I wanted
blacks.
to ask you too. That's what I wanted to
And,
get at.
you know, so, and I could have, you know, so I didn't care where I placed
Yeah,
as long as I got enough votes on the council
right.
that I could collaborate with Republicans. You know, on some issues I had 9 votes because I had Sid Gardner and, you know, so the collaboration, the dialogue, sometimes we would debate something very quietly for 6 months to a year until I could get the votes together. I would never rush to put something through to embarrass another councilman.
Yeah, I wanted to go in that direction, but not only the gay rights ordinance, but with all the other things you were doing for the minority community at that time. And how, you know, what was the reaction of, you know, I don't like to call it the right eye, because I wasn't here at
but
that time, so I don't know what.
What I kept on saying, we had 2-year terms. I said, look, for the first 18 months, let's just do what we think is right. And for the last 6 months, we'll figure out how to get elected. But if you want to be paralyzed, the day you get sworn in, if you start talking about re-election, you're never going to do anything. You're never going to change anything.
No.
So forget re-election.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's right to do for the next 18 months. Then for the last 6 months, we'll all get together. We'll run a slate. And I used to do a lot of fundraising. And remember the picnics and
Yeah.
everything else. And I had all the money raised in 2 months. You know, because I call on people, this is what we need. And then we would just figure out the campaign. And then we had credit as a councilman, you know, with various vendors. So, because you needed street money versus, okay, I'll wait until December to even pay the bill in December. Ace Printer, remember?
Yeah.
What about with the judge running? You know, this can be off record completely. We'll
Yeah.
delete it. But you know, the
Judge,
about this.
which one, Spot?
Killian.
Killian,
Are you advising at all with that, or are you? Are you still on that?
No, I send a note to my kids, asking them all to contribute to Kid. I think he's the, not that he and I will agree on everything, but he's He's a very compassionate person. He's very hardworking. He's extremely bright. And I trust him more than anyone else to solve the problems that are going to come up in the next 2-3 years facing the city. So, in fact, I endorsed killing yesterday.
Yeah, good.
I said, Bob, take a photo with me. I want you to put it in there.
Right.
That's where I'm going.
Because there's a lot of, dissatisfaction with Pedro. And I don't know John Gale, I've known him for years.
Pedro Sagado was a student of mine when
Yeah.
I taught at community college. Yeah, he has a need because he had a very hard life to be liked and overwhelming. I supported Pedro. I taught him when Joe Marfuji and I were teaching at Greater Hartford Community Council. He was 15 years old. That's how long I've known Pedro.
Yeah. Since they first came to Hartford.
Yeah, when he calls me professor, he says, I supported him the last time. But I know the problems facing us. He's not capable of solving.
Do you think the judge is?
Yes.
This is just for my own.
No.
personal opinion.
Nick will tell you. Yesterday, I said to Katie, he's my personal lawyer.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Mhm.
That's the best way to say it, right?
Well, no, a lot of trust. And then, the comment about Pedro is he reminded you of Atkinson.
Yeah.
He likes the ribbon cutting.
Oh, yeah,
That's the ceremonial
the
part.
barbecues, oh, yeah.
Yeah, but the governing,
Some of us refer to him as the perfumed class.
Yeah, no, but George Atkinson, when he was mayor, it was all pictures, ribbon cutting, same as Pedro.
And
and
going to every
Pedro-
barbecue in the town.
Yeah, yeah, and he would go to the.
like pushing around like what LaGuardia used to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was all stunts, you
Yeah.
follow me? Never about government.
What was the time that he rode across the river about something? Do you remember that?
Oh,
Was it
yeah.
about the calendar sculpture or the rocks? And what was that
Here's
about?
what happened is when we built the Buckley Bridge,
Okay.
that old bridge,
Yeah.
stonework, back at the turn of the century, the city of Hartford went to the legislature and said, we'll build the Buckley Bridge. East Hartford was farm country then, couldn't afford it, and we'll pay for it. Because Hartford was a very rich community with all the insurance companies. So the legislature moved the boundary line from the center of the river, when it came from Windsor or whatever it is, to the east, across the river. So the entire river was in the city of Hartford, from Windsor down to Wethersfield. And that's how we paid for the Buckley Bridge, because we owned it 100%. And the city then was a very rich city with travelers and the insurance company, et cetera. We could afford it.
And all sorts
Yeah,
of things.
but this is the turn of the century,
Yeah.
which changed since then.
So why did he row across the river?
Athens,
dressed as Washington, I
so
guess.
there's a guy called Harry Burke,
Yeah.
and I used to call Senator Burke the Jesse James of East Hartford, because he was stealing 1.2 square miles from the city of Hartford and would affect our grants. Okay, but that was the rhetoric I was using. At the same time, I'm saying, well, you guys are going to pass this? Why don't you do something for the city of Hartford, because we're losing 1.2 square miles. So we would then create a grant that the state of Connecticut would reimburse the city of Hartford for hospitals and colleges. Well, all the hospitals were in Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport. So putting the reimbursing us for the nonprofit hospitals, which everybody in the region and the state benefit from, we passed the law. So I used the Jesse James stealing 1.2 part of the river to get the dialogue started. Then I'm up at the legislature Nick, what are you doing that stuff about stealing the river? You know, poor Harry Burke, he was like 60 years old or 70 years old. Mayor Blackstone, who was the mayor of East Hartford, he said, oh, for crying out loud, what can we make a deal on? You know, so it allowed me to negotiate, because everybody knew I was angry. And then...
But in the meantime, George did the stunt of pretending he was Washington?
Well, no, he once rode a horse down Main Street, a Lady Godiva, and he's advertising for candy.
He was?
Yeah, well, he's doing an ad.
Was he nude?
No, but he...
I'd love to see that.
But the stunts he would do for publicity,
Yeah.
rowing across the river was just, he's gonna do...
What, did he
it
help
like,
anything?
no, it was...
Kind of like performance art.
You know what, and I probably had someone egg him on.
Yeah.
If like George Levine or something, let him do it, because then we'll respond to it. And here's what we're going to do:
Yeah.
we're going to take his going across the river, and then we're going to do a press conference about Harry James stealing the river from Hartford, and then we're going to negotiate at the state capitol and make some change.
Because I know he certainly made a stink about the Stegosaurus sculpture at that time.
Well, even the Stegosaurus sculpture, you know, we cut a deal with David Knight, he was a West Hartford State rep, Alex Goldfarb, then all the rocks.
Yeah.
Stonefield sculpture.
Stonefield, Carl Andre.
Yeah.
We put that in, I think the fee was $80,000 or $87,000, and the rocks cost us $13,000.
I know it's worth it.
But look, but it's, but how you make, again, nobody's gonna like the same art.
Right.
The community is so diverse.
Yeah.
So I figured if I got 15 or 20% of the population supporting General Pulaski, remember they all got mad at me because I was supposed to be anti-war, and I put a statue of General Pulaski for the Polish.
Oh, yeah.
Next to the federal building
Yes,
over
yes,
there.
yes.
Well, they picketed City Hall because what I was doing, I was anti-war, and I'm putting a general statue, memorizing war.
Yeah.
You follow me? You can't win. You know what? Don't ever try to win.
No.
Just do what you think is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I do, Richard.
And I'll never forget when I read the article. It was right after the Civic Center roof collapsed. And the article, I don't remember the title, but it was similar to Central City roof collapsed, but the rocks are still there. And I thought, that's kind of cute. There are these rocks just sitting there on the ground, and they're still there, and our man-made thing is falling down. You know, and it's just like...
Well, long and short of the story, that both designed the space frame roof.
Yeah.
Ours was the first one to go down. Within a year and a half after the roof collapsed, in Kansas City, a skywalk collapsed. Same structural design. And then in Germany, an air hangar that was doing with the same structural steel collapsed. Well, it was too late, I left City Hall. I got my walk-in papers, because it was right after the election that two of the other roofs collapsed within 6 months.
Well, the other thing I remember you doing as a kid, because I used to go sometimes, is, you know, you go to a school in a neighborhood, and you'd face the residents there when you were either raising money for something or you wanted to change a police policy, and you'd have a auditorium full of angry people, and you'd answer the same question, because nobody would listen. So somebody would be upset, they'd ask the question, you'd answer it. Somebody was upset about the same thing, but they're so upset they're not listening to the fact that you're answering it. And you would go through and, you know, 2.5, 3 hours later come out. Not everybody would change, but at least people left understanding better the rationale.
The issue, the rationale.
And those are a lot of your nights.
Yeah, see, my view is that each elected official has a responsibility in a democracy to be a public educator. So you can't avoid controversy. It's an opportunity to do the continuous process of public education. You can't do change without controversy. All change comes with controversy.
And not everyone's gonna like it.
They're not gonna like it, but it's part of the education process.
Right.
How do you get the dialogue? How do you get, because democracy, we don't own a printing press.
Proximal zones of development, they call it teacher education.
Okay.
501.
Any other questions?
No, but we'll continue the discussion later, where we see each other outside. So I think this is wonderful to do. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Okay.
And thank you, Nick, for
coming along too.
A lot of fun.
Let's get this thing off here.
我们的宿舍，
这个宿舍很快。
这是我